Be my guest, be my guest, be my guest with Sean Boy Joe. Be my guest, be my guest, be my guest with Sean Boy Joe.
Chris Jarvis! Chris Jarvis!
Hello! Welcome along with Children's BBC and a very special Playdays today. As we're all week, we've been going to Austria in the Playbus, and the Playbus is coming along very, very soon to take us straight over to Austria. It's quicker than the Channel Tunnel.
Oh, careful.
Bang! No, here we go.
Oi!
Three brave explorers willing to risk everything in their quest to rescue treasure from the Temple of the Jungle King. Welcome to Jungle Run. Come on, guys, this way.
How are you, old buddy?
Well, I feel like a new robot.
Oh, I can see.
Well, I did until I saw all this mess. No,
What?
no, it won't do. I mean, honestly, sir, I leave you for 1 week. I mean, did you even do any dusting?
Well, I mean, no.
Hello everybody, welcome back to the Be My Guest podcast channel with me, your boy, Sean Boy Joe. Today we are back for another video because I know how much you love the videos. Click the subscribe button, notification bell to be updated on everything on this channel. You will not want to miss it. Today I have a real corker of a guest. He has been around forever, since the 1990s, working on Children's BBC, CITV, and of course on Channel 4. I am joined by the marvellous Chris Jarvis. Hello, Chris.
Hello, Sean. Hi there.
How are we this sunny morning?
Yeah, and it is a sunny morning. Yeah, pleased to see the sunshine because we've been living in a bit of a monsoon lately.
Yes.
And yeah, so great to see spring at last.
Absolutely. Spring has sprung. Now, you've got an extensive career. We're going to touch upon various aspects of that in the short time that we have. I want to start off like I do with all my guests and find out a little bit about your background and how you started out in this crazy world of kids TV. So talk to me a little bit about the growing up days of a young Chris Jarvis.
Well, I've always been very, very much impressed by character work and voice work. And from a very young age, you know, I started off doing impressions of teachers and members of the family and the Muppet Show and goodness knows what else. And that is how I got into radio and then got into pantomimes and television, and which is what I still do. It's interesting, really, because I sort of lost my way a bit with impressions. I sort of gave up, you know, doing that as an act. You know, I no longer do that in any form of cabaret. I don't even really put them into pantos or anything else that I do. Purely because it's a muscle, you know, doing impressions, and the people who do it, I'm good friends with Deborah Stevenson, who does Dead Ringers and Spitting Image, and she works really, really hard. And actually, it's a harder job now because there are so many channels. People watch different things, you know. In the old days, and it's interesting, I know we're here to talk about Playdays and Play School, which celebrates its 60th anniversary this year. Well, you know, when I was a kid in the 70s, everybody knew who Brian Cant and Derek Griffiths and Fluella Benjamin, they knew who those people were, even if they didn't have children, because there were only 3 channels. Everybody, you'd be tuning in for the cricket, right, and you would see these people. Well, now with all these channels, there are lots of really famous people who I just don't watch. I don't know who they are. And I think it's the same with a lot of people. So to actually make an impression as an impressionist, you have to do so many impressions in the hope that the audience watching will know at least 80% of who you're taking off. So it is a very hard job. So, you know, I left that behind. And I'm very grateful for my career in children's television, because if I'd carried on as an impressionist, I'd probably be out of work. Well, very, very quickly.
One of the days of all the comedy characters you could do back then, which you probably can't do now because people they're not as prominent as they used to be.
No, it's true. It's true. But like Zippy and George on Rainbow, everybody knew who they were.
Yeah.
And Bobby Davro and all the big impressionists of the day would take them off and it would work. If you did an impression, even of Peppa Pig, people wouldn't know who you were really talking about. They've heard of Peppa Pig, but they don't necessarily know the voice or anything like that. So it's a different world. It's a different world.
Yeah. It is. And times have changed. And sometimes I feel that it's progressed for the best. Everybody says about all their generations, how good their generations were, but I don't believe that there is a such thing as a good generation. Everybody will have their own meaning of what their generation was. And you and my generation, of course, particularly in the 90s, was where you sort of began working on children's BBC.
I think you're absolutely right. In that everybody's experience of popular culture is different. I mean, when I was at school, we watched Grange Hill, and the next day we all went and talked about it. It was a brand new, shocking program. There'd been nothing like it before. And what was interesting is everybody watched it. Now, I think, I'm guessing, actually, I do know because there are 36 children's channels on the last count, and children are all watching different things. They might all watch Paw Patrol at some point. They might all watch something that they've just seen, Biggleton or whatever on the Justin's House, whatever it might be, and talk about it. But they're watching at different times. It's not happening. We've lost event television that we used to have, where you'd go into school the next day and talk about what you watched, because it doesn't work like that anymore.
No, well, children have a choice now, I guess, and that's a good thing. They have variety. They can see this because this is online, of course, and they can see, all of the channels like CBeebies and Nickelodeon and all those channels, because they're still there. Not only that, a lot of my generation probably won't be watching it now. So we have to make way for the new generation of kids.
Absolutely. And who are a lot more discerning, because a child now can choose to watch at any time on their tablet or on the television, a Pixar movie, anything they want. Whereas years and years ago, they couldn't. You might have a video recorder with a few videotapes, but you'd tire of those. And also it was quite a fuss to put it all on. It was not as easy as just doing that. And that has changed how we've made television. So in the days of Play School and Playdays, and even Tickabilla, we were making enough for one a day. But now it's changed really, because you wouldn't make television like that anymore. You'd make a series or a season, to use the American expression, of programs, but you'd make a limited number, and all the money that you would put into a whole year's worth of Playdays or Play School, you'd probably put into 20, 30 episodes to make them absolutely fabulous. Not just in terms of, because Playdays was really well written, as was Play School. You had some great writers, but you would spend even more money on the photography, things like that. So Show Me, which was what came after Playdays and Tickabilla, which I did. It was shot like a movie. We only made 22 episodes a year, I think, over 7 or 8 seasons of that, and yet they were shot like movies. We had a director of photography. We didn't have that, on in the old days of going through the arched window.
That's it. No, the times have changed, and we're going to talk about the arched window in due course and the big event that you presented for Play School. But I want to go back to the early CBBC days where you first started out, and you said, being an impressionist helped you, and being a character actor helped you get into your CBBC work.
It did, yeah. So that's why I was hired, really, to be a presenter of links and also to do character work. And we did a little soap opera called Wood Lane TV, which went out every morning at 8 o'clock. It was only a few minutes long. It was meant to be deliberately quite amateurish, and it was. It certainly succeeded in that, with myself and Josie Darby playing all the characters, and it was just silly. It was a bit like Acorn Antiques, it was meant to look sensational, and that was great fun. And we did something like 200 odd. It was well over 200. I can't remember the number, but over 200 little episodes, which all had to be written and performed, obviously, and put out. But that's what I'm saying, really. You just wouldn't do that anymore. It's kind of gone. You know, if anything, YouTube has taken over the role of instant chattiness, and television is now about, you know, big events, Downton Abbey, you know, Strictly, you know, shiny floor shows.
Absolutely. But you were, in a way, you were cool before YouTube was, because in that little room cupboard, in that studio you had, it was almost like a sort of YouTuber's setup.
It was a bit like, it was a bit like that. But I have to correct you there, Sean. I have never been cool. I have
might
never,
disagree.
ever been. No, do you know, I've never been cool. And I tell you why I've never been cool. When I was a young teenager, a load of friends of mine used to do discos. And so for a brief period, I was into cool music and we played a lot of it. And then I think it was in 1989, I think it was, a song called Jack Your Body came out. And I just thought, I can't relate to this. And that's when I became an old man. And I've stayed the same ever since. And I only really like 70s and 80s soul music, you know, in terms of disco. I like all music. And I think we're in a good state again now. You know, there's a lot of really good musicians out there, and they are musicians rather than computer or drum machine programmers. So, you know, that's good. But I've never been cool. I tell you who was very cool, Derek Griffiths, and a handful of others on Playdays, Liz Kitchen and Dave Benson Phillips, who actually really challenged, and Francis Haynes, the music that we listen to in children's TV. You know, it went from you know, brilliant music from years ago to being, you know, very contemporary in feel. And Jonathan Cohen was really good at that as well. And I think that really made a difference to the later play schools and play days. You know, they were cool. Even the theme tune was actually pretty cool for play days. You know, it's really jazz, da 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 da, bing bing. But also the later play schools had a lovely sax riff on them as well. You know, it's just bringing the change. And of course, Sesame Street and the Muppet Shows always been there. Yeah.
And I guess that's what you have to thank as well. They paved the way. And of course, Play School is still going strong in Australia. So that's working very well. And I do feel that there is a market for something like that. I think there's a gap now because children are sponges and they'll soak up what they see. So put them in front of something like Play School, and I think they'll still enjoy it. So you spoke a little bit about the Playdays, and we'll come on to that in a second. And we were talking about the broom cupboard and how the broom cupboard, for me, watching, always looked very basic. It's almost like, oh, you're in your living room here.
Yeah. Well, where it was, the broom cupboards, what were the broom cupboards, were actually the voice booths for the continuity announcers for BBC One and BBC Two. So in the South Hall of Television Centre, this is about, I think it was about the third floor at the back of Television Centre, there was a corridor, and off this corridor were the two play-out galleries for BBC One and BBC Two, the main play-out galleries. So there might be a separate gallery for Blue Peter or Tomorrow's World or Top of the Pops, whatever was being made live, but everything would feed in, including all the videotapes, everything that was being played out went through these two galleries. And it's still similar today. It's just more computerized. But these galleries had about 6 or 7 people in them making them work. You know, you needed, because everything had to be back timed. In those days, videotape took 20 seconds to get to speed. So you had to start a video player 20 seconds before you wanted it on air, because it took that long to get going. A bit like me now. And at the end of these galleries was a booth, as I say, and that was the broom cupboard. And it was really like a radio studio with a camera bolted to the wall in front of us, in front of all the monitors, and a few lights slung up in the ceiling. So it was what it looked like on television was exactly what it was. There was no smoke and mirrors
No,
that
very
you would
authentic.
get with a big studio. Yeah, so a lot of us were hired because we'd had radio experience, because it was more about coping with someone talking in your ear, operating equipment, as well as being able to perform to a camera and hopefully be amusing or make sense, which
Just laugh
wasn't
your way
always
through.
possible.
We all do it. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Did you ever get tired? I always remember watching when they would read out the letters and the pictures and the cards, thinking, how do they make these cards so wonderful? I'm like, this is a perfect picture of Noddy here. I was so envious, and my mother was like, I can't draw that.
I know you had to make sure that it didn't become a art competition for the parents. So you had to be sort of. It was almost like, well, that one, just doing it blindly. I mean, there was no selection going on at all, because it was the luck of the draw as to what went out. But as you were presenting them, you're absolutely right. You did have to be careful not to be too complimentary, because otherwise, well, what about the really rubbish one? Which you said nothing about at all.
No,
oh, what a lovely piece of paper! But
you don't want to make my little girl cry. Trust me. Yeah. No. So talk to me, as you mentioned then, let's move on to Playdays. And of course, I am doing a very big reunion with a lot of the cast. Talk to me about your memories, because you were only in a handful of episodes. I'm very surprised at that.
Yes, you see, I'd be a very fraudulent guest there, because I was only I think I was in 13. I'm pretty sure it was 13 episodes of Playdays, but and a lot more. I think we made, once again, over 200 episodes of Show Me. So I did a lot more. But what was interesting about doing Playdays, especially later on, because the production company that made Playdays knew that at the time I was doing them, knew that they had lost the gig. Teletubbies was coming along, and the money that was going to Playdays was going to be given to a different company to make Teletubbies, which was in production, so the writing was on the wall. And I did quite a lot of the ones that I did were actually in extended time, because Teletubbies wasn't ready, and so they were just making extra Playdays. So I felt very sad, actually, because it was a massive part. People who had given their lives to public service broadcasting, albeit through a commercial company, were losing their jobs, and this happens all the time. So it happens all the time in television, but it's still an awful thing for them, knowing that it was coming to an end. But that's the nature of television. It's a finite thing. There were only 12 40 Towers. There were only however many series of Dad's Army. That it's going to come to an end. Yeah. But I think, it was a real privilege to work with people who were so good. I mean, the puppeteers were just brilliant. Sally, Sue, and Ellie, they really knew what they were doing. They knew their characters. They knew how to, or the technical side of they were brilliant. But also on the other side of the camera, names that aren't so familiar to the general public, but, people who gave their lives to children's television, not just with Playdays. They'd worked on Play School, all sorts of things, and there were some brilliant characters putting stuff together, really clever, inventive directors and writers who we are lucky are still around. They are still feeding into what goes on today.
Brilliant. And they're giving back to the next generation of people that are following in their footsteps. And
on top of them actually being there, you've got all those resources. Anyone who's sensible, if they're working on preschool television, will look at old episodes of Tickabilla, Playdays, Play School, and see what's going on and what worked.
Absolutely. And it was back in the day where you can actually put kids in front of the TV and trial them first to see whether things actually worked. Because of course, at the end of the day, they're the ones that are going to be watching it. So.
Yeah, and there are lots of trailblazers. Brian Cant was a really interesting presenter. I know he was Play School rather than Playdays, but he really invented that way of talking to camera, which was very relaxed and more like grown-up radio and television rather than the old "Hello, children, are you sitting comfortably? You know, it was very relaxed. You know, it was just an open shirt and you know, sort of not slouching, but you know, relaxed.
It
So
was
people
just him,
feel
wasn't
relaxed.
he? Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
there are,
it's
you
very
know,
much
there's some
so.
really good performers like that. Carol Shell, Poi Fan Lee, who I work with on Show Me, was really good at knowing how to not only present using the lower register and, you know, not getting too carried away, not too jumpy and shouting and leaping about, but also knowing that you're broadcasting to people in their living rooms, you know, or bedrooms and kitchens. We're not on stage at the Palladium.
Yeah. So you mentioned Poi there. You worked with her on Show Me. Initially, you two were a double act. When Cbeebies launched, you were one of the very first presenters of that. So how did that come about?
Well, we were lucky enough to be the first 4 presenters. So it was myself and Poi and Sid and Sue, who you'll know as Poppy the cat in Playdays. And yeah, that was great to do because once again, you know, it was you know, a little bit of everything, you know, storytelling, character work, puppeteering, and that variety I don't think you get in many places, but you really do get it in children's TV. I was just about to mention, you know, if you said to Dave Benson Phillips, I need you to go on that stage and entertain a crowd for an hour, he would do it just like that.
Oh yeah.
You know, there aren't many performers who can do things like that. You know, Justin Fletcher could, you know, Max Fulham, you know, but you know, you go to Hollywood and take any of the, I mean, they'd be able to maybe remember some lines from a film they once did, but you know, would they be able to do that? You know, that's what I think.
You've got to be switched on and they can do that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And miraculously, you're still working on CBBS today, and we'll come on to all of the programs that you and Poi are producing, which are beautifully done, by the way. And we'll come back to that very soon. But I want to talk about, well, a certain Mr. Chips, because when the chips are down, you've got the voice to do it. And you worked on Catchphrase with Nick, providing some of the continuity many years ago.
Yeah, I did a couple of series of Catchphrase, and I used to do a lot more voice work, and yeah, it's a funny thing. It's a bit like impressions. Once you get off that horse, you know, it's very difficult to get back on again, and also time as well, because you have to commit for so many weeks, obviously, to be able to do it. But you know, my career's sort of gone in a different direction, really, because most of my year is taken up by pantomimes. You know, I do a big theatre pantomime down in Poole. I quite often write for other people, but also the CBeebies panto is a massive thing. Every year we spend months working on it, and then we go into a big theatre and we film the show over 4 performances, which are all filmed. It's then edited, goes into the cinemas, goes on BBC One as well as CBeebies, and then it lives on the iPlayer. So it's a big production, which I love doing, and I love working with the talent, because once again, you know, the children's TV presenters, I mean, increasingly so, I would say, are just so dripping in talent. It's a joy. It's once we put the work in. You know, they make it so easy. Yeah, so easy. We'd almost
Panto seems wonderful to do. I mean, I've always looked at all these performers and thought that must be a bliss job. I mean, you a couple of years ago made your first debut as a Dane, didn't you?
Yeah. So that's you know, going off in another direction altogether, and I do enjoy it very much, and it's something you sort of graduate onto when you're too old to be leaping around the stage. But it's a different kind of energy, you know, to cope with all the changes. But no, it's great, and so I do a lot of pantomime throughout the year, and a lot of what we do on children's television, I think, has its roots in pantomime anyway. And things like Justin's House, for example, it is a sitcom on a higher plane of slapstick comedy, which comes from panto. And you've got someone like Justin who has all his circus skills and experience of doing that sort of thing that makes it work.
I think panto is lovely for families because when you've got a channel like CBeebies or CBBC, you kind of exclusive to one audience. But when you take that from the screen onto the stage, it's lovely when you've got people like you and people from different generations coming out doing those CBeebies pantos, because someone like Ian Luckman can come out with his little finger mouse and the adults would remember that and the kids would be like, well, what is that? So it's just lovely to go through a cross generation.
Yeah, and increasingly though, it's interesting you should say that, because the sort of talent pool that production companies take performers from, if they're looking for celebrities or well-known faces, is actually very different. When I was first started doing pantos and going to them in the 70s, I used to do amateur ones back then, which were obviously with a different kind of rep company of people. But when you went to see the commercial ones, you'd normally see somebody who'd been in a sitcom, that they were like but now sitcoms are mainly American, the ones that are too and have become their own thing, and the sort of the David Croft style sitcoms like Hello Hello and Heidi High and Dad's Army, where all those performers used to feed out into panto. Well, they're disappearing. The number of people. I mean, thank goodness we've still got people like Sue Pollard, Vicky Michelle, and but it's different. And so people are looking elsewhere. Children's television, the comedy scene, and mainstream actors as well. Who'd have thought Ian McKellen would do panto, but thank God he did.
Absolutely. But I think panto has changed, because it's you often see a lot of the soap stars now rather than the comedy actors. But
that's it.
And but that's the way life is. It's 2023, and when you get a good panto, you get a good one, and when you get a bad one, you get a bad one. But luckily, I've out of all the pantos I've seen, I think there's only ever been one bum. But other than that, they've been brilliant. And long may panto continue, because we weren't able to get out and see panto, all those years during the pandemic. So it's lovely to be back out working with a live audience as well, because you get that instant reaction from an audience when you're performing live, which I guess is very different to a TV studio. But I want to come on to some of the work you've done for CITV, because working with children on stage is very different to working with children in the jungle, Chris. So talk to me a little bit about Jungle Run, because of course you took over from Dominic Littlewood. And then of course Michael Underwood came after you, but your stint in the jungle was very interesting at that.
Yeah, no, I was very, very lucky. It's the only, apart from the very first job that I got on the broom cupboard, I had to audition for it, and
did
I
the
thought,
children choose you to be a part of that?
So, that's right. So I went in there, and there's a whole load of us, and the kids chose me. Thank God. I don't know why. I was probably the least fit out of all the others. But
did they know you before that? Were they like, oh, we know you as Chris from our television screen?
I don't know, because
maybe possibly. They felt safe with you.
Yeah. Right. But it was a great privilege to do that show, because once again, it was completely different to anything else I'd done. Nearly all the shows I'd done to that point were static. You might move across a even quite big studio sometimes. You certainly didn't run, and you didn't swing over rock pools or tunnel into pyramids and that sort of thing. So it was great, and it was a brilliant experience, because technology had changed to allow programs like that to be done more easily, because it was filmed in an aircraft hangar, not a studio. The set, I think, cost £1 million. It was really expensive. Very, very expensive to do. I mean, it was vast. We're talking about 3 swimming pools and all these structures. I mean, it was absolutely awesome.
Wouldn't have the budget nowadays, would they?
It's a different world, yeah. And and not only was it a very expensive set, it took a lot of people to make it work. So there was one game, I don't know whether you've watched it, but there was one game where one kid had to go into this pyramid full of tunnels on all different levels. The tunnels were blocked by different trap doors that had to be opened by solving puzzles from two guys upstairs on walkie-talkies.
Yeah.
You can imagine what was going on behind the scenes. I mean, you had people operating all those doors, listening to hear what the children were doing, getting information from. It was so technical. It was really, really hard for the production team. I had the easy job. I said the same thing in every show. I just had to say what was going on. Easy. The people who worked the hardest were the kids. And the people trying to work out what they were doing to make sure everything happened like magic in the program. And it did. There was one confusion in one episode where I believe the timing went wrong. And I remember the children knowing that something wasn't right. I mean, perhaps they should have won when they didn't. And it was awful. And I couldn't get involved because I didn't know. I was in the studio, well, the aircraft hangar playing the game. But apart from that, it really was magical what they did, because I wasn't wearing, I don't think I was wearing, I wasn't wearing an earpiece. So I don't know.
We could tell that. We could certainly tell that every time you'd tell them off. Like, move out of the way, climb over there.
There were three kids who were really hopeless, and I really empathized. I mean, I was laughing with them because they were such good fun. They knew, and I was that child. I was exactly. I mean, I was hopeless at sport, absolutely hopeless. I've got no coordination. I'm still the same, and but they were such good fun, and we had such a laugh together. And they did go away with the prize, but you know what? They had such a good day, and it was the funniest program. Because actually I think they did some research, and I don't think the audience particularly liked it when the kids won. They much preferred them to be trapped in the last game.
I remember in the very early days of that, when they were trapped, thinking, are they really going to be trapped in there forever now? Thinking, actually, no, that's not true. But it was like, and then at the end of the show thinking, they've done all of those tasks just to win a Tamagotchi. Like, what is going on here? Like, it doesn't make sense. And then, maybe they were told to just smile and go, I really enjoy this, but I'd much rather have a Scalextrics.
I know. I mean, it's very sad because it was shown for about 10 years at least after we finished filming.
I was thinking, do they still make these things?
Well, people used to come up to me, kids used to come up to me and say, can I go on Jungle Run like that? And I said, when he gets to the end and I say, you've won a CD player or whatever, do you not think that is a bit rubbish?
Or maybe ask Michael, because he did it many years after me.
That's right. Yeah, where the prizes, got a bit more techie. But
we will park aside Jungle Run, never mind the boogie prizes. I think children just did it for the competition, really, because they liked playing against each other. So another couple of people that like to play against each other are the Chuckle Brothers, and you were on an episode of Chucklevision. I was so surprised at this. I rewatched it back a while ago and thought, is that Chris?
We had the Chuckle Brothers on a few of because I used to put together the Cbeebies, not Cbeebies, CBBC Christmas panto. So we did 3 in the 90s at the Big Bash, which was this big exhibition in Birmingham. So one hall was full of programs and toys and goodness knows what, and the other hall at the NEC was made into a theatre, 3,000 seater theatre, and we did 5 performances a day for 5 days. And in there we had all the big names of the day, Peter Simon and Michaela Strachan, all the Blue Peter presenters, quite often a few pop stars as well. And the Chuckle Brothers, they'd come in their Winnebago and come on and do some amazing turn. So I got to know them over the years, and I went on their game show to meet you and Chucklevision as well. So I did at least one episode of Chucklevision, and they were great. And I was so sad when I heard Barry had passed away, because he was really good to me, and we used to have a long chats Paul is also fantastic, but quite often had to rest because he's got a bad leg, and you know, he'd have to rest up a bit. But I'd go and chat to Barry for a lot of time. But anyway, I caught up with Paul recently. He was doing pantomime in Woking, and we went out for a drink after one of his shows, and I caught it. I caught it because it went on longer than my one, and I caught the show. And you know, it must be so hard after all those decades of working with someone else to suddenly be on your own. But he was phenomenal. It was really funny. He bonded with the other people on the stage, and still, what a pro. Real pro.
Yeah, as you said, it must be very daunting when you haven't got your sidekick there after all those years. You've got to kind of tweak comedy as well, because you can't always do what you were doing with your partner, you know, on stage, because they can't do their sort of catchphrases and that sort of thing. So you have to kind of tweak that. But then when you've got, I guess, Barry in the room in the third audience, they give back to you just as much.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting, you know, because I find performers like the Chuckle brothers and their brothers, the Patton brothers, where they have an act that they've toured around, they are the most secure and the most humble. They're the performers with the most humility and the most generosity, because they've got nothing to prove. They know they can go on stage and entertain loads of people. There's no axe to grind. They don't rely on being horrible to other people and you know, that sort of aggressive comedy that you might get from, you know, somebody who's, you know, the old stand-ups, you know, not so much these days. But they're just so great to work with, and they just want the show to be good.
Absolutely.
I do remember one thing they said. Though, you can always spot a good script because, you know, it's got very little dialogue in it. And they're absolutely right.
It's just the look, isn't it? It's just the look, and the timing was impeccable. Right. So before we move on and come to present day, I want to, as I do with all my guests, talk to Chris about the television that he was watching when he was younger. And I'm sure you've got stacks of TV, unless you were out in a field somewhere chewing grass.
No, I used to love television, you know, and I very rarely watch it now. I'd much rather listen to the radio or do stuff. I do, but I'm well behind on everything. I'm always the last person to get into a series. But when I was a kid, I watched everything, all the half-hour sitcoms, which was bizarre, really, because my parents were both academics. My dad was a professor. My mum was a head teacher. And they did allow me to watch.
You've got the perfect job then.
Yeah. But they did allow me to watch ITV because I had friends at school who weren't allowed to watch ITV. It was considered uncouth.
Right.
And no, I watched a lot of telly, all family stuff, you know, nothing, you know, after 10 o'clock or something like that. No, right. But I watched all the sitcoms, and I think that was my first love. I loved them. Are You Being Served, Dad's Army, Rising Damp, all of them. I just thought they were brilliant. And I loved the world in which they lived. I loved that rep company of performers who were just there to make us laugh. And it was the same on children's television. You know, Play School was just a group of people who were there to entertain me, just me. Yeah. And, you know, Rainbow, I loved Rainbow. I loved the naughtiness of Rainbow. Yeah. I liked the comfort and the security of Play School. But Rainbow made me howl with laughter. And then Rent-A-Ghost, which was like a pantomime, and it had Biggins in it and a really good cast of comedy greats, Anne Emery, and all sorts of great actors. And it was produced by a friend of mine now, because I've worked with him on pantomimes, Jeremy Swan. And anyone interested in children's television and comedy, he was great friends with Kenneth Williams, and he worked with Kenneth on a lot of Jack and Norris. But he did anything that was funny. You know, there's a good chance anything that was funny on children's television in the 70s, 80s and 90s, because he did Uncle Jack and all those programs as well. Round the Twist, if you remember that. Yeah, there's a good chance his name was associated. And he's just about to publish his memoirs, so they come out soon. Right. and he's a great artist. He's great fun. But yeah, I'd say those programs. I like the dramas as well. Grange Hill, as I mentioned earlier, we all watched that at school. It was very naughty. You know, we were just waiting for it to be cancelled. You know, surely they can't allow this to continue. Trisha Yates. Oh my.
Yeah. So it has been fascinating talking to you, Chris. It's been wonderful to have you on the channel, and we have been trying for a long time. I want to come on to present day. I want to come on to what you're doing now, and you and Poi still have a great relationship on screen, off screen. You've toured with Show Me. You toured in my hometown of South London at the Fairfield Halls with Show Me. You know, you've done so much, and you're working on or you have been for a number of years now, working on a children's TV program. Talk to us about that.
Well, the biggest success we had was with a show called Old Jack's Boat, which we wrote for Bernard Cribbins, who I became friends with over the years. I did panto with him in the 90s, and you know, he was the master storyteller. He holds the record for having read the most stories on Jackanory. And of course, Wombles, Railway Children. He was a big star, and it was very sad to lose him last year. And he filmed 2 series of Old Jack's Boat and 2 series of Rockpool Tales, which is actually closer to the initial concept that Poi and I came up with. So yeah, it's based on a song that my dad wrote, who sadly also passed away a few years ago. But he wrote a song called Old Tom's Boat, which we changed to Old Jack, because there are lots of Toms on children's television. And there were very few Jacks. And also Bernard was in Carry On Jack, so we chose Jack.
Very clever.
And it is one syllable, kind of works. You know, we had a great team. There was some really good producers over the years, and writers who wrote more stories. Poi and I wrote some of them, but you know, we were busy with Show Me and a few other bits and pieces. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot harder now to get programs commissioned. There's a lot of competition for very few slots, because as I said earlier, we're making less television better in terms of, well, better's the wrong word, but you know, with more concentrated resources, like director of photography and all. You know, it spends a lot longer in the edit. The concepts are explored for a greater amount of time. You know, it's a different process. It's a very different process of making a children's TV. But so I'm still, you know, still chat to Poi. Poi's very busy. She's been in a drama for HBO and is doing things outside children's television. I've sort of stayed with pantomime and children's TV. But, you know, I'm really hoping she'll have time to come back and do some more CBeebies. You never
know. They fly the nest, don't they? And you can just watch them grow. Long were the days of Teletubbies and Poe. Right. So let's talk about, before we end, some of the radio work that you're currently doing, because you've got a station that is dedicated, you know, solely to children, that plays children's music, stories, songs. It's basically just you. It's all of you and a bunch of stars from our childhoods.
Yeah. So Little Radio was a children's radio station that we set up just before the pandemic and as an experiment. And then we kept it going, even though we knew it wasn't sustainable throughout the pandemic. So we kept it on for 2 years. It's very difficult in this multi-channel age and with all the rules surrounding broadcasting to compete with YouTube. So, I mean, anyone can make anything, put it on YouTube, and as long as they don't break the law, and there's some really good little books actually on, because you are broadcasting. You know, but it's a lot stricter, and the way you finance radio and television is very, very difficult. And we were losing thousands of pounds So we had to stop after a while. We just
Right.
couldn't afford to keep it going. But we were very fortunate. A lot of people gave their time and read stories, presented programs, and all through the pandemic. And we got a lot more listeners than we were thinking, because we didn't know it was coming. Obviously, the pandemic. So we'd only sort of guessed that 10,000 people or so would listen. Based on how many people watch a program on CBeebies, for example.
Yeah.
We're never going to get that, so it's going to be tiny. But as it happened, it was tens of thousands. I mean, I've lost the dashboard. It belongs to Nation Radio, which is one of the big groups. There's Global Radio, there's Bauer, and there's Nation. The three big radio owners in this country, who have big networks of radio stations, and they supported it. So we're really grateful to them for doing that and keeping it on air and making it work. But and it was great fun to do. But as I'm sure you know, Sean, radio, it eats time. It's very, very difficult to do. Not that television doesn't, but there's always an end to television. You're going to make the program on such and such a date. You go and you do it over. After the edit, of course. But radio is it is hard work, and I did enjoy it, and I'd still be doing it, if it could have paid for it, at least cover its costs, but it didn't.
Yeah. So talk to us about more brighter times for you. Then what are you up to now, Chris?
Well, I'm still,
apart from the reunion that you did with Play School, which I managed to catch, which I thought was fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it was an incredible day. It's on YouTube. It was the 50th anniversary, so it was 10 years ago, exactly 10 years ago, celebrating Play School. And
was it 10 years ago now, right?
Yeah, but it's only just been released.
That's what confused me.
Yeah, no.
So you don't look a day older, Chris. See, I can't tell the difference.
Close up, you can. But no, it was awesome, truly awesome. People use that word a lot, but it really was truly awesome to be in the same room looking up at Johnny Ball and Derek and Brian and Carol. Everyone was there. Ian Loughlin. The only person who was missing was Fluella, who was sadly on holiday on that day, which was the day that they started Play School, so they were rather committed to using that day.
Well, she can be excused. She is a dame, isn't she? So she's allowed a holiday.
She is, and she probably, she deserves it more than all of us put together. But no, it was an incredible, and also the creatives there, Joy Whitby, and all the people who had made that program happen, all the brains behind it, as well as the familiar faces. But no, it was a great honor to do, because I grew up watching a lot of those people, and they influence you. Johnny was a brilliant clown, and Derek with his music and mime, the storytelling, and the comfort that people like Carol Shell and sadly Chloe Ashcroft, but there's a few people not with us anymore, including Brian now. So that was one of the last things he did. But lovely to see them all.
Are we seeing more of Chris on our screens, or are we going to be hearing more from you?
Well, I don't know. Every day it's a surprise.
Yeah, all of them.
I'd say, but in terms of me on screen, I rushed in because unfortunately somebody was taken ill. A great actor called Steve Kinman last year, who used to play Robert the Robot in Justin's House. So I took over his role. I only had a couple of days, literally, you're on. And so I did my best impression of Steve Kinman that I could possibly do.
Helped being an impressionist.
He's still talking to me. I got a text from him the other day, so he obviously didn't mind too much.
No, but you don't sound that dissimilar to me.
Actually, it's quite scary because once all the makeup's on and the costume, I actually caught myself in a monitor go, oh my god, it's Steve. I think we must have very similar facial features. Most recently, for radio, so after Little Radio, I recorded 2 series of a program called CBBC Magic Den, which I'd love you to listen to. It was great fun to do. It was done in the tail end of lockdown, and so put a lot of time into putting them together. And we had guests like Sue Pollard, Heidi Campers who was wonderful. I think if I had to pick a favorite episode, it would be hers because she was so funny and really good. And it's Auntie Sue's repair shop that she did. And basically, it's like a normal repair shop, like the one you see on the telly in the after, except her repair shop, everything goes wrong. And it's really very silly, you know.
It's a bit of an archetype moment.
Yeah, a lovely cupboard out of a, you know, antique grandfather clock. She just pulled all the stuff out and made it into cupboard. And also in that program, I had Stuffy, which is a character from Show Me Show, who talks a bit like this. You know, he's a bit downtrodden. He's a cube, and you know, he's based on, you know, sort of every Cockney character that you ever saw in the 70s on sitcoms or sort of thing. And I also had the voice of Auntie Edie. I was in this flat in the Magic Den with my Auntie Edie, and the voice I chose for that was Thora Hird, who not everyone will remember, but she was a wonderful character actress. She was in Last of the Summer Wine, but loads of films and things. And she had a lovely voice. And it's an unusual voice because, you know, it sounds sincere, but at the same time quite comedic, and it's a great fun to do. So she would burst into
looking for compo now. He's about
talking to yourself. Pardon?
I'm looking for compo somewhere now.
Well, I worked with his son Tom, who was great and very much like him. And I used to go out with Tom Owen, son of Bill Owen, and people used to shout Nora Batty and all this sort of things because they thought it was him. It was great. It was great for him because he could honour his dad. He could honour his dad and do panto every year, and he was brilliant at it. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Chris. It's been wonderful chatting to you about all of your glitter and and you're very humble to say that you are not a star, because I think you are, and you have been a blast from the past in my podcast. Another one to tick off the list. Another hero of mine from my childhood. And I will see you all very soon in the next podcast. Thank you, Chris. It's been brilliant chatting to you.
Thank you for all you do, you know, keeping the dream alive of children's television.
Oh, I hope so. Thank you. Thank you very much, Chris. And I will look forward to seeing everybody soon.
All the best to you, Sean.
If your mansion house needs haunting, just call Rent a Ghost. We got spooks and ghouls and freaks and fools. Rent a Ghost. Hear the phantom of the opera sing a haunting melody.